The first thing I want you to notice is when you desire revenge, it encompasses your emotions. The God of judgment is also a God of mercy. And aren't you glad that God is gracious and merciful towards you? And maybe the person that wronged you, maybe they see, if you respond with grace and mercy back, that there is a God who is gracious and merciful. I'm going to talk to you today on the subject of revenge, and it's something that, if we're honest, I think we would say that we all love revenge. And I know that we love revenge because some of the best-selling movies ever are revenge movies, right? Like I'm going to tell you right, you probably shouldn't watch this with your kids, but Gladiator is a great movie about revenge. You know, here's this guy who lost his family was killed, and he comes back and makes everybody pay. We love that, man. We love people getting what they deserve, you know, or Braveheart was another very popular movie, really built on the premise of revenge. Here's a guy who whose wife was murdered, and he's going to come back and get revenge. And so there is something in us that wants to see, I shouldn't say that we love revenge, but we want to see people pay for what they have done to us. And so revenge resonates with us because of the fact that I don't know anybody who hasn't been wronged in one way or the other. So if you're sitting there thinking, well, Pastor Mark doesn't know what he's talking about. Look, we've all had people do stuff to us that are wrong, and we want to see them pay. We want to get them back, okay? Now, there's a lot of people that think that it's okay to be a revengeful person. It's okay to make sure that people pay. But I'm going to argue today that it is not. And I want to use the example here in 2 Samuel 3. We're going to be introduced to a guy named Joab, who we have talked about a little bit before, but not much. We don't know a whole lot about him. We know that he is related to David in I believe he's his nephew. We do know that he is a guy that if you want to win, you want him on your team. Because he will do anything to win, okay? And he doesn't lose a lot of battles. You'll see it here. He doesn't lose a lot of battles, but he can be a little bit unethical. You know, I told you about when I played intramural sports, they said that they made us say, okay, I will do whatever to win except sin. Well, he would do whatever to win, including sin. Okay, this is Joab. All right, so Joab is a guy that is, in fact, he's one of the few men alive that David was scared of. David was actually scared of Joab. And there's a verse that talks about that he kind of dwelt in the caves, or in other words, he didn't really like being around people. I mean, he's just kind of a rough guy. He was an intimidating guy. He was a scary guy. And he's a guy that really, because of his leadership, Israel had a lot of victories. But we're going to look at an instance here where he exacted revenge on Abner. Now remember, Abner was the leader of the other 11 tribes. He was kind of, Ishbosheth was the puppet leader. The real leader of the 11 tribes was Abner. Abner is trying to bring everybody together. Is it a political move? Absolutely. Is he shady in doing it? Absolutely. But he is trying to bring the 12 tribes together. And David sees this as a good thing. But remember, Abner was the guy that killed a kid called Asahel. Remember, Asahel was a really fast runner. We studied about this. Asahel was running beside Abner, and Abner was warning him, basically, stop, don't, turn back, or I'm going to kill you. I mean, he warned him, and he did not murder him because this was an act of war. I mean, they were in a battle. They were in a war, and Abner warned, and I'm not here to defend Abner, but I'm saying that he didn't murder Asahel in cold blood. In fact, I think he actually took his sword and tried to back him up a little bit. He didn't intend to really run him through, but because of his momentum, he just ran right into the sword and ended up he ended up dying. So Joab can't get over this. He can't get over the fact that Abner killed his brother even though it was in a time of war, and he wants to see Abner pay. He wants to see revenge done on Abner. And this is where this story picks up in verse number 22. So where we left off last week is that Abner is meeting with David. It is a time of peace. You'll notice that it says in the last part of verse 21, so David sent Abner away and he went in peace. So this is not a time of war. This is a time of peace, all right? And they're trying to bring all 12 of the tribes together. So it says in verse 22, at that moment, the servants of David and Joab came from a raid and brought much spoil with them. And Abner was not with David in Hebron, for he had sent him away, and he had gone in peace. When Joab and all the troops that were with him had come, they told Joab, saying, Abner the son of Ner came to the king, and he sent him away, and he has gone in peace. So I think that David did this on purpose. I think he had Abner come when Joab wasn't around, because he knew that it would probably not go well with them two being in the same room. You have two alpha dogs, two type A's. You couldn't get them together. So I think David, in his wisdom, brings Abner in while Joab's gone. Joab comes back. He has a victory, brings back a lot of spoil. And what's the first thing that people say to him? Hey, man, Abner was here. And so what does Joab do? He goes right into David, verse 24. Then Joab came to the king and said, what have you done? Look, Abner came to you. Why is it that you sent him away and he has already gone? Surely you realize that Abner the son of Ner came to deceive you and to know you're going out and you're coming in and to all that you are doing. He goes, look, Abner's coming here to spy on us and to spy on you and to figure out your schedule and to figure out your patterns. And can't you see that? And he's really frustrated with David. And I think it shows a lot about David that David would allow him to speak to him this way, but he's really frustrated with him that he won't see it his way. That Joab is frustrated with David because he will not see Abner for who he is. It doesn't give us David's response, but it says in verse 26 that when Joab had gone from David's presence, he sent messengers after Abner who brought him back from the well of Sirah, but David did not know it. So he sends messengers after Abner and says, and probably uses the king's name, and says, hey, David would like for you to come back. He wants to work out a couple more issues. So there's probably a lie being perpetuated here. And so he sends him back because Abner's not going to come back if it just Joab wants him back. But he'll come back if David wants him back. It's not like some messengers came and said, hey, Joab would like to talk to you. Well, I wonder what he wants to talk to me about. Probably about his brother's death, right? But if David wants him back, then David, he left in peace. Everything's good. Yeah, I'll go back and talk to him. So Abner turns around. He comes back to Hebron. It says in verse 27, Joab took him aside in the gate to speak with him privately, and there stabbed him in the stomach so that he died from the blood of Asahel, his brother. Interesting thing about Hebron was, you remember in the Bible when somebody would kill someone, they could go to what is called a city of refuge. So if you were out in the woods and you're with somebody and you accidentally shot somebody, I mean, obviously, they don't have, let's do bow and arrows, right? So you're going to shoot this deer or something for meat and you miss it and you hit the guy. Well, and you kill the person that you tried to kill the deer and say you kill the person. That's what I would do because that's how terrible of a shot I am. So do not go hunting with me. That's the motto of the story. So if you kill somebody on accident, well, the family of the person that you killed, it's just you and him. They may want revenge on you. You could go to a city of refuge and they couldn't kill you there. So basically, you could run to this city of refuge. And it was a place where you would get protection, and you would get a good trial, and you would get a fair trial. And this was their process of dealing with death and dealing with crimes. People could go to places of refuge, cities of refuge, and escape immediate trouble if they really believe themselves to be innocent. All right. Hebron is a city of refuge. So he calls him back to Hebron. Well, Abner feels safe in Hebron. But what Joab does is Joab gets him outside of the gates because you can't kill somebody inside a city of refuge. So Joab gets him outside the gate and says, hey, come here, I want to tell you something. And as he whispering to him, he runs him through and kills him, avenging his brother's death. Well, this is a bad deal. And this is a bad deal for a lot of reasons. Because who is the leader of the 11 other tribes? It's Abner, right? Ishbosheth, but Abner really is the main leader. Ishbosheth's kind of the puppet king. So they're trying to bring these two together, and then the leader of the 11 tribes gets murdered by somebody in David's party. This looks bad. This is bad. This whole agreement could fall apart now because one man wants revenge. So David's in a pickle. David's in a bad spot because of the actions of Joab. So it says in verse 28, afterwards when David heard it, he said, my kingdom and I are guiltless. So he puts out a statement on Facebook and social media and on the Jerusalem Times. And he says, my kingdom and I are guiltless before the Lord forever of the blood of Abner, the son of Ner. He says, look, I had nothing to do with his death. He just wants that to be publicly known. I had nothing to do with this man's death. And he says, he calls out who did it. Let it rest on the head of Joab and on all his father's house, and let there never fail to be in the house of Joab one who has a discharge or is a leper, who leans on a staff or falls by the sword, who lacks bread. So basically what David does publicly is he pronounces a curse on Joab and his family. And he basically says, I hope for the rest of your life that your family has some kind of trouble. That's basically what he says. Because David's in a bad spot too, because Joab has all the military behind him. So if David kills Joab, which I would argue that he should have done, because a death penalty was, you kill another man without a cause, that's death penalty, you should lose your life. But David, one of the things that you're going to learn about David, in particular in this book, is David is weak with his own family. Like, he was a great leader, but he was terrible at home. He was a horrific father. He did not discipline his kids. They ran amok. They did all kinds of stuff that they should have been punished for. And David's like, well, they're just good boys. Okay? Now, as a leader, he was awesome. But at home, he was terrible. He was not a good husband. He was not a good dad. And it's just one of the proofs, again, that God uses broken, weak people. All right? And this is an instance where Joab is family, and he doesn't want to come down too hard on family. So rather than killing Joab, he just pronounces a curse on him. Verse 30. So Joab and Abishai, his brother, killed Abner because he had killed their brother Asahel at Gibeon in the battle. Now that's interesting, right? Because who killed Abner? Joab or Abishai? It was Joab, right? But Abishai got indicted too. You know why he got indicted? Because he probably knew. He was probably in on it and didn't say anything. So in the writer of Samuel, he says they both killed him because they both knew. So what happens next? 31. Then David said to Joab and to all the people who were with him, tear your clothes, gird yourself with sackcloth, and mourn for Abner. And David followed the coffin. So they would bury him real fast in Israel. Somebody had to be buried within 24 hours. So basically, David says, Joab, you are going to mourn his death. So you need to tear your clothes and put sackcloth and ashes on your head, and you need to follow the coffin with me. He makes him publicly mourn his death. Verse 32, so they buried Abner in Hebron, and the king lifted up his voice and wept at the grave of Abner, and all the people wept. And the king sang a lament over Abner, saying, should Abner die as a fool dies? Your hands were not bound, nor your feet put into fetters. As a man falls before wicked men, so you fell. Then all the people wept over him again. And when all the people came to persuade David to eat food while it was still day, David took an oath, saying, God do so to me, and more also, if I taste bread or anything else till the sun goes down. So, in other words, they're getting ready to bury him. They have buried him. They're in a state of mourning. David hasn't eaten anything all day. The people come to him and say, David, you need to get something to eat, man. This has been a long day. You're probably worn out. You're emotionally You're emotionally on the fringe. You need to get something to eat. And he's like, I will not eat till I'm not just going to bury Joab or bury Abner and move on. And this really spoke to the people because of what it says in verse number 36. Now all the people took note of it. So they noticed that he was really upset. It wasn't just a show. Do you ever get sometimes a feeling like politicians that they kind of mourn and they're upset and it's just a show? David seems genuinely upset that Abner has died, and he is genuinely upset. And the people, they took note of it, and it pleased them, since whatever the king did pleased all the people. For all the people and all Israel understood that day that it had not been the king's intent to kill Abner the son of Ner. We think that being skeptical of politicians is something that we have just invented. Being skeptical of politicians has been something that's been since the beginning of time, because we're skeptical of humans. You ever have somebody say, oh, I love you, and you're like, I don't think so. Right? Okay, we're skeptical. This is kind of our nature. So the people initially are skeptical that this was all kind of a plot that David and Joab had worked out, but they're coming to understand through David's actions that no, David didn't have anything to do with this. And so they really rallied around David. It says, verse 38, then the king said to his servants, do you know that a prince and a great man has fallen this day in Israel? You know, I kind of mentioned the things that David did wrong. And one of the things that when you have a very compassionate heart like David had, you will tend to be soft on people. The positives of that is you will see the good in people even when they're not so good. And I think that's David. David really is meaning what he says. He really thinks Abner's a good guy, wanted to bring the two countries together. Maybe a little bit naively, but this is how he saw him. And I kind of wish that we could be a little bit more like that. I guess I could be a little bit more like that. You know, because we focus on the negatives of people. David focuses on the positives. And this guy's a great man. He's a great general. He brought people together. He doesn't focus on how he has made my life miserable for the last 7.5 years. He's like, hey, he's trying to make it better now. He's a good guy. Verse 39, and I am weak today, though anointed king. So David is now officially the king over all of Israel. So he's probably a little bit hacked at Joab because his first act as a king is to have a funeral. Man, wouldn't it be better to have a coronation and he comes into Jerusalem and man, it's a great time, but instead he's dealing with a funeral his first day on the job. It says, I'm weak today, though anointed king, and these men, the sons of Zeruiah, that's Joab and Ahijah, are too harsh for me. And that's an interesting line. He goes, I can't deal with these guys. And that's where I said to you earlier that he was really intimidated by these guys. And he says, they're too hard for me to deal with. In fact, David would not deal with them. One of the things that we'll learn later is when David died, one of his last words was to his son Solomon. He says, okay, Solomon, you're taking over for me. One of the first things you need to do is kill Joab. That's what he said. Because this guy will give you nothing but trouble. And he should have died because of the death of Asahel here, but David's too scared to deal with it. And so he's like, these guys are too harsh for me. Then he says this, the Lord shall repay the evildoer according to his wickedness. So what is he doing? He is committing Joab into the hands of God, and he says, you know, God has seen what Joab has done, and he will make sure that he pays for what he has done. So that's the story. Let me give you a few points about it, okay? What happens if you become like Joab and you become consumed with revenge for somebody that has wronged you. It does several things to you that we see in the text. One, when you desire revenge, it encompasses your emotions. The first thing I want you to notice is when you desire revenge, it encompasses your emotions. So the text starts with Joab riding in from a battle, right? That he won and he brought back a lot of spoil. But what immediately affects his mood? Hey, Abner was here, right, mumbling under his breath. Do victories bring you happiness? Does much spoil, should it bring you happiness? Should it bring you joy? Yes. I think the answer is yes to that. So Joab should be happy. He should be joyous. He should be grateful for all that God has provided for him in giving him victory, sparing his life, and giving them much spoil. But what is he focused on? Abner? Stinking Abner? See, this is what happens to us when we are consumed with revenge. Somebody does us wrong and we want them to pay. Our mood is entirely tied to the person that we want revenge on. So when they're suffering, we're happy. When they're happy, we're sad. And we're completely consumed by this individual that we hate and we want revenge towards. They absolutely consume our lives and they consume our emotions. So we're having a good day and then we sign on to Facebook. And somebody we can't stand, our ex-boss or our ex-wife or our ex-husband or whoever is on there, and they're in Jamaica having the time of their life, and your day just got ruined. Because they deserve to have a miserable day for the rest of their life. But you see them having a good time, so now it ruins you. Your emotions are entirely encompassed by this individual. This is why it's a mistake to seek or desire revenge on this person, because it encompasses your emotion. We see that with Joab. We see the second thing is, it destroys your discernment. What happens when you become obsessed with somebody, when you hate them because of what they have done to you and you want to see them pay? It destroys your discernment. You can't think straight. All you care about is you and wanting to see revenge on that person. And this is Joab. Joab says, hey, David, can't you see that he's wanting to come in here and spy on us? Now let's be honest. Joab is losing his mind. This is a bad argument. If Abner wants to find out David's coming in and going out, then he's going to send a spy there. He's not going to come himself. It's just like he's lost his mind. He's saying stuff that doesn't even make any sense. And that's why I think that David doesn't respond to him, because it's like, Abner, this is dumb. Or Joab, this is a dumb argument. I'm not even going to respond to this argument. He's not here to figure things out. He came in peace, man. And we're not giving him secrets. We're not handing over what the battle plan is. We're trying to reconcile here. And if you are bent on revenge, it affects your discernment. And this is one of the problems with revenge. You oftentimes do worse to the person than was perpetuated to you. So, in the case of Abner, for example, Abner killed Asahel in an act of war. He warned him, said, hey, back up, kid, stop. And the kid wouldn't stop. So he ended up, and even I think used his sword to try to back him off, and Asahel ran right through it. And in a sense, killed himself. But see, Joab doesn't want to hear any of that. He doesn't think any of that. He sees the world through his eyes. And he wants him to pay. So what does he do? He doesn't kill him in an act of war. Joab kills Abner in cold-blooded murder. In a city of refuge. At the gates of a city of refuge. Who did worse? Joab did. So what happens to us is when we get consumed with revenge, all discernment goes out the window. We start making stupid arguments to justify our actions, and we try to drag other people into it with us, and this is what Joab is doing. He's trying to get David to see it his way, and he's obviously frustrated with David because David won't see it his way. But David's judgment is not clouded by revenge as Joab's is. The third thing I want you to notice that it happens to us and happened to Joab when we are consumed with revenge is it saps you spiritually. It saps you spiritually. You know what's interesting in this whole text? I never see Joab one time seek direction from God on what to do. Do you? I never see Joab go, okay, Lord, what would you have me to do? Because Joab already knows the answer. What's the answer? Forgiveness, right? What's the answer? Don't murder. Have you ever prayed that God would change his mind about his word? Doesn't work out real well. God's pretty set in how he wants us to live. And so, but what happens to us is the revenge dominates our life. See, my goal and your goal every day should be to get up and live my life as God would have me live. Live according to the Word of God, the plan of God as written out in His Word. I live my life out of a love for God and a love for others. Isn't that what Jesus said that we should do? We should love God and love others, and this should be our motivation for life. And so, when I'm driving down the road, I love God and I want to, and I love others, and so when I go to my job and I want to, the motivation for my life should be to love God and love others. And man, as I live this kind of a life, I get closer to God. Draw nigh to God, and He'll draw nigh to you. But what happens is when the consuming passion of my life is to make that person who wronged me pay, that becomes the driving force of your life. So loving God and loving people is completely out the window. All you're thinking about is, I want them to pay, I want them to pay, I want them to pay, I want them to pay. And what it does is it just saps you spiritually. You used to come to church and get something out of it. Now you can't get nothing out of it. You know why you can't get nothing out of it? Because all you can think about during church is, wonder what so-and-so is doing right now. They having a good time? Boy, this is, how do you know you're being sapped spiritually? You're in church thinking about the person you hate needs this sermon. Right? Well, I wish so-and-so was here because, boy, they need this. What is that a sign of? I'm not thinking about God, how is God speaking to me? I'm thinking about how is God speaking to the person that I hate or the person I'm angry with. Joab's in a terrible place spiritually. And that's what revenge does. 4, it wrecks your relationships. It wrecks your relationships. When you get revenge, or you live in this world of just constantly getting revenge, it puts people you love in a bad place. Have you ever had to defend somebody that was indefensible? Okay, this is what happens when we do stuff out of revenge. It puts people that we love in a really bad place to say, well, this is why they did it. And what it does is it puts tremendous strain on the relationship. Joab is the main general in David's army, and now there's this huge strain between these two guys. Their relationship will never be the same because one guy acted in revenge, and it brought great pain to David, and it put David in a bad spot. Now, it fortunately looks like David doesn't hold a grudge or doesn't give Joab what Joab gave Abner, but it's still, it's like, look, man, it's going to be tough for us to get along. I mean, when you're placing curses on people, that's not good. I'm going to say the relationship's not strong. It wrecks relationships. David and Joab's relationship was never the same. So what we do, the collateral damage of you trying to get even with your ex-husband is that it puts your current husband in a bad spot. And it puts your kids in a bad spot and puts your family in a bad spot. The better way is just to forgive, give the person to God, move on. Because not only will you destroy the life of the person that you want to get revenge on, you'll destroy your own life and you'll destroy all the relationships around you. So it wrecks your relationships. Number 5, I've got to move quickly here. It ruins your reputation. It ruins your reputation. How does David describe Joab in verse 34? He says, as a man falls before wicked men, you fell. What's he calling Joab there? A wicked man. He's not known as a man of valor. He's not known as a man of courage. He's known as a wicked man. That's his reputation. I love what Martin Luther King Jr. said about revenge. He said, an eye for an eye leaves everybody blind. Just dumb. It ruins your reputation. He is now known as a fool. He is known as a wicked man. And he's never trusted by David again. Number 6, it results in regret. It results in regret. The Lord shall repay the evildoer according to his wickedness. This is the problem with revenge is that when you say, God, I know your word says to give it to you, but I'm going to take care of this, okay? And then you do something that is counter to the word of God, that puts you in a real bad spot with God. Because now you are now in a position where you need to suffer the consequences for the sin that you have committed in getting revenge on somebody else. So you were in a good spot with God, but now you're in a bad spot because you stepped outside of the realm of God and said, God, I got this. I'll take care of it. I know your word says that vengeance is mine, I'll repay, says the Lord, but I got this. God says, no, you don't got this. It's my job. Let me do my job. Can I just tell everybody in the room, speaking to myself and all of us, we all make horrible gods. We can't think like God thinks. So what happens is that if you do an action in regret, or you do an action in revenge, it will always result in regret. If you have the Holy Spirit inside of you. Because you do something like, you ever been at a table and you're sitting around and here's this person across the room, across the table, and they think that the person we're talking about is, man, they're a good guy. And you got some juice on them because they hurt you, and you're like, So we take the place of God and we say, look, you think they're a good person? Let me tell you some things. I am God's agent of revenge on this earth. Because I want to make sure that you know this person is scum. Can I tell you something? As the words are coming out of your mouth, the Holy Spirit will be convicting you. Shut your mouth, bro. Stop. And what happens is that when you take the place of God, it results in regret. Let God be God. Let God do his job. I got a hard enough time managing my own life, much less managing yours. And much less managing God's. So what's the better way? Real quick. Relinquish revenge to God. Relinquish revenge to God. I don't have time to read it, but I encourage you to go home and read Romans 12, the whole chapter. But one verse I want to pull out in particular. Beloved, do not avenge yourselves, but rather give place to wrath, for it is written, vengeance is mine, what does it say, church? Does that say I might repay? What's the word it uses there? Will. So does that mean God will do it? Yes, it means God will do it, okay? So what we got to do is we got to understand that God doesn't do things in our timetable. So I want this person to pay. Okay, they will pay. God will make sure of it. Don't get in the middle of it. Don't get in the middle of it. Let God do his job. There's too many of us, including myself, who are like Joab, and we get in the middle of it. And let me tell you, when you get in the middle of it, you often suffer as much as the person who God is pouring out his revenge on. Just don't get in the middle of it. God alone can judge fairly. We don't know all the variables. We can't measure about his heart. God maintains the moral order, not us. We need to remember that no one is going to get away with anything. God will make sure that justice will be done in his way and in his time. And this is the thing that a lot of times we have a hard time with. The God of judgment is also a God of mercy. And aren't you glad that God is gracious and merciful towards you? And maybe the person that wronged you, maybe they see, if you respond with grace and mercy back, that there is a God who is gracious and merciful, and that they can be reconciled to him through Jesus Christ. But I'm going to tell you right now, if you as a child of God get revenge on somebody who is not a child of God to satisfy your own selfish desires, you are ruining their chance of reconciliation. Because it's like, if that's what a Christian is, I want nothing to do with it. So, give it to God. Now, what is this? Now, I can hear a lot of your arguments right now. Well, so I'm not supposed to do nothing? There are agencies. The Bible says that one of the purposes of government is to help justice happen. There are agencies of justice. So what do? I get the authorities involved. I don't turn when it comes to somebody murders somebody close to you, you get the government involved. You get the institutions involved that God has set up to deal with this situation, and you take it to its fullest extent. It doesn't mean that you don't do anything about it, but don't go all vigilante. That's not God's way. Use the authorities that God has placed. God has put government. They are ministers of justice. That's one of the reasons why they're here. But what if there's corrupt government? Isn't that the same thing? Right? But we have to trust God in this process. You understand what I'm saying? We don't need the Wild West again. We need rule of law, and we need justice done. We do it in the right way. So, but at the end of the day, we've got to stop trying to get revenge. We've got to stop letting this person who harmed us, who did us wrong, controlling our lives. And how do we do that? We do that by living like Jesus. What did Jesus say as he's hanging on the cross? Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Lord, lay not this sin to their charge. What does that teach us about Jesus? He was not he wasn't hanging on the cross going, oh boy, it's coming for y'all. What did he do? He had mercy on those men, didn't he? So when somebody does you wrong, it shouldn't as much make you angry as it should make you sad. Because they're going to pay. And God will see to it. And they just messed up their life. Don't mess up your life trying to get even with them. Let God do his job, okay?
Thank you again for listening to our series on 2 Samuel with Pastor Mark Doss. If you have questions about today's message, please contact our church office at info@topekabaptist.org. Give us a call at 785-862-0988 or check us out online at www.topekabaptist.org.